Liberty ships. If America had a superpower during World War II, it was production. At the start of World War II, America was the greatest industrial nation. However, America's industrial capacity would more than double during World War II. During the war, the United States produced 300,000 aircraft, 200,000 artillery pieces, 86,000 tanks, and 2 million trucks. But out of these impressive numbers, America's ability to produce ships underscores its true production power. And the Yanks were proud of it, as they should be. Production power became part of American identity, celebrated in every media form available. At its peak, the U.S. Navy was operating 7,601 ships on the last day of World War II. America's Navy was larger than the rest of the world's navies combined. But out of all the grand and powerful American ships, it was the Liberty ship that best represented American industrial power. The Liberty ship to date still holds the record for the largest number of ships ever produced using a single design. Over 2,700 Liberty ships were built between 1941 and the end of 1945, with a tonnage of 10,856 each. That's almost 30 million tons of steel total. An average of 3 of these ships every 2 days were pumped out of 18 different American shipyards. At peak production in 1943, 3 Liberty ships appeared every single day. The design originated as a British concept, but was adopted by the United States. In 1940 alone, 1,000 merchant vessels were lost in the Atlantic. The Brits were desperate to make up for these losses and could not produce as many ships as were being destroyed. They first ordered 60 basic ocean-class freighters from the Americans, and the first launched was the Ocean Vanguard in August of 1941. The design laid the blueprint for the Liberty ships that were to follow. The original British design was also focused on being cost-effective. The original design used coal-fired plants due to Britain's domestically available coal and lack of domestic oil production. They also used extensive riveting. U.S. versions replaced the majority of riveting with welding, which saved on tremendous labor costs. They also replaced coal power for oil power. The U.S. ships would use vertical triple expansion steam engines, an aging design compared to the preferred steam turbine engines available. However, steam turbines required precise and timely manufacturing, so the engines were chosen for ease of production and maintenance. The ship was capable of a top speed of only 11.5 knots, or about 21 kilometers an hour. Liberty ships were not fast, nor maneuverable. They were also ugly and rode like a bathtub. They corked and wallowed about in the slightest swell. But comfort or speed was not a priority. The ships were designed to carry 10,000 long tons of cargo, but during wartime would carry loads far exceeding this. The ship received the designation EC2 SC1, EC for emergency cargo, 2 for a ship between 400 and 450 feet long, S for steam engines, and C1 for design C1. Several variants, some with and without unique designations, were designed. Some carried tanks, others fuel, aircraft, or troops. A Liberty ship could carry up to 260 medium tanks. In 1944, 6 Liberty ships were converted into floating aircraft repair depots. The first Liberty ship was launched in September of 1941. The ships were constructed in sections and then welded together. This section building process was already being done in England, but using extensive riveting, which added months of labor. The Americans revolutionized this process and made it more efficient, particularly using new welding methods. The construction techniques would be as new as the workforce implementing them. Many women, minorities, and older people began working in these shipyards to replace those who were enlisting in the military. The first Liberty ship took around 230 days to build, but this dropped to an incredible 39 days by 1943. The quickest record for a ship being built was 4 days, 15.5 hours, after the keel had been laid. This was a one-off publicity stunt and not repeated, but it showcased how efficient production had become. America did what it does best and made the assembly line style production of the ships more efficient with each ship built, but issues did arise. Early Liberty ships became famous for hull and deck cracks. 3 Liberty ships built broke in half. This included the SS John P. Gaines, which sank in November of 1943 without warning, costing 10 lives. This was considered less an issue with the design of the ship and more an issue with the rushed manufacturing process that could combine low-grade steel, new welding techniques, and inexperienced workers. Adding to this issue was the frequent overloading of Liberty ships. Future Victory ships would increase the spacing between the frames in the hull to provide better flexibility. Liberty ships were vital to America's war effort, and to other nations depending on American supplies, which was every Allied nation. American manufacturing had to overcome two obstacles. Production had to be greater than the rate at which ships were being sunk en route to their destinations, and enough ships needed to be produced to send goods up to 8,000 kilometers away or more at a rate that better supplied Allied forces compared to enemy forces. Imagine having to supply an army 8,000 kilometers away in a way that would outmatch your enemy supplying their troops from their front yard. Furthermore, wartime shipping routes were significantly longer than peacetime. U-boats and aircraft had to be avoided. Convoys had to be organized so ships could be sent in groups for safety. Some ships were only able to complete 2 journeys every year from America. Liberty ships were depended on for everything from food to road wheels, but they were also depended on for combat at sea. World War II saw unprecedented increases in firepower. Anti-aircraft guns on ships, for example, required up to 100 times as much ammunition towards the end of the war than they did in the first year. American battleships and carriers were floating cities, producing equivalent power to a small city and requiring equivalent resources. In terms of the main guns, a World War II battleship can toss 1,200 tons of shells per hour. This is the payload equivalent of 300 flying fortresses. These vessels were extremely dependent on supply ships. Liberty ships also involved themselves in direct combat. The SS Stephen Hopkins sank the German commerce raider Stier in a ship-to-ship gun battle in 1942 and became the first American ship to sink a German surface combatant, though this also came at the loss of the Hopkins. Liberty ships were typically armed with a stern-mounted 4-inch deck gun for use against surfaced submarines. They could have a variety of smaller anti-aircraft guns. One notable ship to distinguish itself in combat was the Lawton B. Evans, which survived a torpedo attack in 1943, and in 1944 at the Battle of Anzio, brought down 5 enemy planes with their anti-aircraft guns, and provided covering fire to assist the Allied landings in Italy. Liberty ships were crewed by up to 62 U.S. merchant marines, and up to 40 United States Navy Armed Guard, who would man the deck guns of the ship. Navy Armed Guard would typically train merchant marines to use any of the guns aboard a merchant vessel. However, the majority of Liberty ships were unable to fight back. They were large, slow-moving targets, and many were lost to U-boats. Further dangers for the brave merchant marines crewing these ships included their cargo. In July of 1944, the SS E.A. Bryan detonated with the energy of 2,000 tons of TNT while being loaded. 320 sailors and civilians were killed in what was called the Port Chicago disaster. Another Liberty ship that exploded was the SS Grand Camp, which caused the Texas City disaster after the war on the 16th of April 1947, killing at least 581 people. In the last year of the war, America would upgrade the ship design and begin producing Victory ships, of which just over 500 were built. They were faster and better armed. Alright, I'm Johnny, thanks for watching and floating along until the end of the video. I hope you have a nice rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.